Ever wondered about drunkenness in the Babylonian Talmud? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be exploring in this 165th episode of The Jewish Drinking Show, bringing L'chaim to life. So as we kick off looking at drunkenness in the Babylonian Talmud. So usually, people talk about the Talmud. Obviously, last time we did the Yerushalmi, so we're not leaving any Talmuds unturned here. But now, thank you. So we're going to look at the Babylonian Talmud. We were able to look at, I think we had 9 texts, give or take, in the Yerushalmi. We have a lot more than that in just this part 1 of exploring the Bavli. So as you can tell, there's a lot more about drunkenness in the Babylonian Talmud. First, we're going to look at these. We have a half dozen texts looking at the early rabbinic. So we're talking about around the turn of the 3rd century, so up until about 200 to 210 Common Era. So the first one is a really interesting, this text 1 in Tani 22b. I don't have a lot to say about it aside from saying, so this was actually something we encountered a few weeks ago in the Torah portion. This is a reward that I will give your rains in their season, but this is a really interesting language. Lo shikurav lo tzmeav ela benoni. It's not, but it talks about these being like a drunken rain. I don't think it's about the rain being drunken, but rather just so much being overly given. Velo tzmeav, not dry either. There's and I think people who are familiar, this is probably nearby, with Choni HaMa'agel. So Choni, the circle drawer, is like sleeping for 70 years story. But before that, there's this moment where he brings too much water. And it's just too much. So there is such a thing as too much rain. That is possible. And I think that's one of the blessings about this pasuk, is to be an appropriate amount of rain. But I find it fascinating, almost like an anthropomorphization of rain, that it could be drunk. It sounds poetic. I don't really know much further what to do with that. We have the second text. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, mainly because I've done an episode on it, which is, so they have this thing, it says ispargus. It's asparagus. It says, it is agreeable for the heart, beneficial for the eyes, and all the more so for the intestines. One who is accustomed to it, it is agreeable for his entire body. One who gets drunk off it, it is difficult for his whole body. So this is not, we're not talking about the asparagus that we all know and eat, but it is something that does have vegetables. It's a concoction, so it's something they're saying it has these medicinal properties. Asparagus? It has vegetables in it. It has one. It's a mixture.
It's not the plant asparagus.
No, it's not. I can find this. Someone found, I think it was like in Pliny, had a recipe for asparagus, and you have like maybe a third of it is wine. You do have some vegetables, so there's a green vegetable component to it, and then some other stuff. So it comes across as kind of medicinal. That's why they say, what it makes me think about, like these vegetable smoothie shakes that people have, like in a health nut. It's just, this seems very like that, just with alcohol. With regards to the drunkenness, for us to extract from this, it's, having, especially since it's maybe a third of this is wine, plus you're having a lot of vegetables, you're having a lot of other stuff. It's reasonable that this would be difficult to digest, maybe, right? In good measure, it's a good, a lot, not. Text 3 is something similar to what we saw in the Tosefta, actually. Also, yeah, we saw this in the Tosefta in, I think, Trumot, where this was very similar, except there's one other additional line that I don't think was in the Tosefta.
One who is drunk, his purchase is a purchase and his sale is a sale. If he transgress the transgression for which he should be put to death, they kill him. For one that he should be lashed, they lash him. Here's a general principle. He's like a normally functioning person in all matters, except that he's exempt from prayer.
Thank you. So this is almost word for word, very, very, very identically similar to what we saw in Tosefta Truma. The different the sales are sales, transactions, and I think we had discussed like
sins are sins.
Yeah, and the sins are sins, right? You can't just say, "Well, I was drunk. I have no responsibility for anything that I did." Right. So it's not a get out of anything free card. The addition that is new here that was not found in the Tosefta is the exemption from prayer. That once you're drunk, you're exempt from prayer, and I suspect it doesn't say it here, it doesn't spell it out. My suspicion is it's because you need kavanat halev, you need mental intentionality, and in order to pray. And if you don't have that by being drunk, then you can't fulfill this. And also, I think it's interesting, important for us to consider is that there's also, again, no negative valence given towards this. You are responsible. Drunkenness is not an excuse. And prayer is, I think that's the really fascinating thing about this in the Babylonian Talmud is you're exempt. You got to be drunk and you are not, it's not that you're not responsible for prayer. It's just you don't have the mindset. You are not within the category of being under a chiyuv. So now you're exempt from it. Text 4 is a braita that talks about, well, actually, it was a nice segue. Why? Because this is about Kohanim doing these different, procedures while serving. One of them is being drunk. That is pasul. It's not good. But, I mean, going back, even any temple service, the Kohanim are not supposed to be drinking in the first place. And something else we saw definitely in previous, I think it was the Tannaitic one, we saw that, the Kohanim are not supposed to be, first of all, they're not supposed to be drinking. Like in Leviticus 10:9, there's an explicit, you're not supposed to be drinking on the job as a Kohen. And then we saw in, I think the Mishnah Tosefta that a drunk Kohen that's a problem. And so even obviously doing this meshes perfectly with all that. For him to be he shouldn't have been drinking in the first place. And then to be even to the next level of, being buzzed. But now he's drunk and on the job. Like, this is a problem. It's pasul. It doesn't count. Yeah, he's probably not doing everything according to the parameters set out. So that is a problem. Text 5 is something we have actually seen before. We saw it in one of the Midrashei Halacha. We saw it in the Talmud Yerushalmi, and we see it here. And by the way, this text really is a very prevalent text throughout a lot of rabbinic texts. I actually ellipsized a bunch of this. It's a huge story about Rabban Gamliel. And as we saw both with the Talmud Yerushalmi and with the Midrashei Halacha, it's funny, he has to ask someone like, wait a second, did we drink wine? Yeah, we drank at least a few ounces of wine. Oh, right, we did drink the wine. Well, I should probably hold off before providing my halachic, rendering a halachic decision, which is just also amusing. Wait, did we drink wine? So, if you have to ask, you probably should lock this up. There's a reason he's asking. But it is interesting that this is one of the things, so he doesn't outright state it, but it's one of these things that are learned. One of these 4 lamdanu we learn, shiravis yain hi talki mishakir. So this Italian wine, even having these several ounces is enough to intoxicate. Not sure what the parameters of intoxication. This is actually one of the interesting things because it provides a quantification, which is interesting. We don't usually see that. It's more of, well, we kind of know when we're drunk. Here and it doesn't necessarily mean, there's an ambiguity. Is he actually drunk or just sort of on the road to drunkenness or maybe somehow being affected by it? So that is an interesting ambiguity of this text. And again, this text, we keep seeing it. Again, Midrash Halacha, Yerushalmi, it just keeps popping around. But it seems to be a pretty foundational text not to render a halachic decision once you've had a few ounces of wine, which happens, right? It happens. Rabbis drink, right? And Jews have questions. Final one for our Tannaitic stuff is text 6. Does someone want to read this one?
Sure.
Yeah. So we'll take the next one.
One of the ones,
next one.
6 acts starts immediately, and they are, if one came back from a journey on the road and was exhausted, let blood, and entered the bathhouse, drank and became intoxicated, slept on the ground and engaged in sexual intercourse, and he will die.
All right, thank you. We're not going to go into this right now because of one of our later texts that does actually say something about this. Hey there, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. I wanted to break in and actually let you know this is not the only episode on drunkenness to come out this year. In fact, we have a whole handful of episodes coming out in a little mini series on drunkenness. So you can go check out this along with other episodes all at jewishdrinking.com/drunkenness for episodes, clips, and more. And I hope you're enjoying this episode. I hope you go and check out those other episodes on drunkenness. And now back into this episode on drunkenness. Moving on to some early 3rd century texts here. We've got text 7, which for those who are at the Talmud Yerushalmi one, this will seem really familiar. There are a lot of parallels. It does not match up exactly the same, but it is very, 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 very similar. Ula, but maybe it was a Braita, so it could have been an early Tannaitic text, or it could have been a Tannaitic text. The sages instituted 10 cups in the house of the mourner, 3 cups prior, 3 during, 4 after. They correspond to each of the things, which is not in the Yerushalmi, I don't think. They added to those 4. So they started out with 10. They had 10. That was how they had in the mourner's house 10 cups of wine. I will also mention they also diluted their wine. So this is not 10 of ours. This is closer to 3 or 4 of ours, which, several glasses of wine. You're feeling good, but okay. They added to those 4. They added to those 10 another 4, 1 noting the attendance of the city, 1 noting the actions of the leaders of the city, 1 noting the temple, and 1 noting Rabban Gamliel.
Is this associated with Birkat Hamazon?
So the 4 post-meal ones were. The one corresponding to the first blessing, the second, the third, the fourth. So they did have one corresponding to each of the 4, but these are 4 on top of those 10. So there were the 3 pre, 3 during, and then 4 after the meal that correspond to each of the 4 blessings of the Birkat Hamazon. And those were the original 10. They had 10.
The ones that the 4 who feeds all, blessings of the land, builds Yerushalayim.
Those are.
That's all like in Birkat Hamazon.
Right. So those are each of the.
So you're drinking a cup during different parts
So
of the Birkat?
that I'm not sure if they're drinking it during each blessing or all of. I'm not sure actually how that works. That actually goes unexplored. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I'm not exactly sure on the mechanics, and then you have to think about the blessings. Yeah, think about the blessings. You have to keep saying, I don't know, or maybe just have in mind you're just going to keep having wine. Yeah, but then once they had those 10, and that had been going along, they decided 10's good. Let's do 4 more. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. And so they added these 4. However, so we're going now from like 3 or 4 cups of our wine to 4 or 5 cups of wine. And at this point, they began doing the 14 model, and they would drink and they would get drunk. Okay? Now, the sages restored the matter to its previous status. Now, I'm just going to spoil something. What is the previous status? I think all of us reading said this previous status is clearly 10, right? That's what it was before we had those 4 that caused people to be getting drunk. The thing that's not entirely clear is why the rabbis did this. It's obvious that they did not want people getting drunk, but is it they don't want people getting drunk at all, or they didn't want to mandate drunkenness? Meaning, if you are part of the party, or maybe, who knows, maybe you are not someone who's really comfortable, or you're not used to getting drunk, like you just want to be Menachem Ava, right? You just want to comfort mourners.
Right.
You're there,
Right.
and you know you're going to be leaving drunk. That may not be the best. It may be one thing that if people who want to get drunk can do so, but to mandate it necessarily, that may be too onerous. Mm-hmm. So they probably said, let's just go back to the 10 that was more manageable. It did not mandate drunkenness. It does not necessarily mean that they were against drunkenness. Maybe they're just against necessitating or otherwise mandating the drunkenness. Something that we explored when we talked more about this in November, when we talked about mourning and drinking, it was, so Rashi and Rambam, well, actually Rashi was like, yeah, they had 10, and when they went, in the Hebrew it says Liyoshna. What is Liyoshna for Rashi? He says they went back to 10. And Rambam also, in Mishnah Torah, says they went back to 10. Now, Rambam, however, he is not a fan of getting drunk, and so he said they capped it at 10. Rashi didn't say that. It was Rambam was like, 10's the upper limit here. So then but the fascinating thing is really ultimately what happens is Ramban says, you know what, maybe the Yoshna isn't the 10. Why not go back to 0? There's no part in here where it says, well, originally it was 0. That's not part of either here or the Yerushalmi. No one has that text. It just was 10. That's just what was customary. But Ramban, and I guess there were some other Rishonim who said, maybe we should be doing this at all. So, and then ultimately when it gets to the Shulchan Aruch, it's like, okay, you can have some wine if you need help, I guess. But by then, and I don't know if it was a Spanish thing, but it really fell out of used to really have so much drinking going on at the mourner's house. But, clearly for the rabbis of the Talmud, that was common, that was normal, that's what people did. That's where you definitely drink at the mourner's house. But by medieval times, especially amongst Sephardim, but it becomes widespread that it just sort of falls out of use. But I think for our purposes, the getting drunk aspect is, I think it was the not granted, this is sort of a Rorschach test. I think that the rabbis didn't want to mandate people getting drunk just because you want to be there. You want to, you're at a mourner's house. Although I also understand those who say that this would be an unbecoming or this isn't a good behavior to be having around. So maybe you can see it either way. Text 8 is going off of Proverbs. This verse, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes to say, where's beers? So what is this for kings? What do you have to do with kings who drink wine, become intoxicated, and say, why do we need God? Nor for princes to say, where is beer? One to whom all the secrets of the world are revealed, should he drink wine and get drunk? There are some who say, one to whom all the princes of the world rise early to his door, should he drink wine and become intoxicated. This actually really picks up, obviously it's quoting Proverbs, picks up on one of these common themes about drunkenness in Tanakh, in the Bible, that people who probably shouldn't be getting drunk a lot are people in power, positions of power, kings, princes, people who really are making key decisions, shouldn't be. And we can easily picture, especially any TV or movies, we've definitely seen royalty or people who are just in these massive, incredibly positions of power that they don't really care. They've already reached whatever they need to reach. There's nothing really controlling them, and they're just going to live in a drunken stupor, and that's fine. And so this is really, I think, both the Proverbs text, generally in Tanakh, especially Nevi'im Ketuvim, sort of going against having people in positions of power just being drunk all the time. And this is also working against that. It's seeming to say, like, this isn't really what people, kings and princes should be, how they should be leading their lives. This is text 9, but referring to text 6. This is Rabbi Yochanan says when he performs in this order. Meaning, you did these 6 sequentially in this very particular order, then you're going to die. You did all of them, meaning you did literally every one, you did them in this order, and now you're going to die. That's a lot. I mean, probably, I don't know if this is just, yeah.
Sorry, it sounds like a lot of wear and tear on the body.
Yes.
Everything we need exhausted already.
This will wear you out. I don't know that it would kill you. I mean, maybe you're just like close to dead. I'm just like, I have no energy left in me. I don't know that you're dead. At least for Rabbi Yochanan here saying that it's got to be in this order. That makes sense. It's a lot. And it's not just like only doing one of these things, maybe all and in a particular order. It's a lot to imagine. Hey there, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far on drunkenness in the Babylonian Talmud. But guess what? We couldn't fit everything into just one episode. So here's a sneak peek into next episode, also on drunkenness in the Babylonian Talmud. Here we go. It's one thing to be exempt from prayer, but people might still, nevertheless, just because I'm exempt doesn't mean I don't want to still go ahead and pray.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoy that sneak peek into our next episode on drunkenness in the Babylonian Talmud. That will be releasing in 2 weeks, and I hope you come back to check it out. And here we go, back into this episode.
Rabbi Hanina said they taught this only when one has not reached lots of intoxication, but when one who has reached lots of intoxication, they are exempt from all of them.
Everything, your purchases, your sales, your everything. Now when you have reached this level of drunkenness, you are really exempt. But at that point, like, I don't think anybody says, well, I want to do all these things so I can be exempt. But like, I don't know, maybe a purchase or a sale, like you were not in the right mind. Like there's one level to being drunk, but being that's so far gone that they're saying, you know what, you are really.
Something that you may regret. Let's say.
Yeah, like I didn't mean to sell my boat.
Yeah, you have a bet with somebody. It's like,
yeah.
If you do this, whatever, like, I'll bet my boat or I'll bet my house that you can't do that. And you're so intoxicated. Right. That obviously you're not in the right mind. Something you'll regret afterwards. And
absolutely.
Rabbi Hanina is saying, exempt from all of that. Like it's not.
Maybe there is another level. Maybe there is a way.
Maybe taking advantage of you.
Right. So maybe there is a level of drunkenness in which maybe these transactions should not actually have gone through. Like, and I think that's what he's saying is like, there's got to be a level that this really cannot actually take place. Like, give the man his car back or whatever. Like, I think that's an interesting wisdom. And I'm pretty sure that the Shikruto Shelo, even though I've seen it appear in many, and it gets used often in post-Talmudic texts of speaking about levels of drunkenness.
Yehuda and Chizkiah, sons of Rabbi Chia, were sitting at a meal before Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and they were not saying anything. He said to his servants, "Add more wine for the young men, so that they will say something."
You can see younger men, and they're quieter, and like that's a pretty visible.
Rabbi Nasi.
Right, it's Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He's pretty important. Like, yeah,
It's like, feel comfortable, drink,
yeah, the feel market. Yeah, loosen up. Right.
Once they were inebriated, they loosened their tongues and said, "The son of David, the Mashiach, David, will not come until two fathers' houses are destroyed from Israel, and they are the head of the exile who is in Babylonia, and the Nasi who is in Israel, as it is stated, and he shall be for a sanctuary, but for a stone of stumbling, and for a rock of offense to both the houses of Israel." He said to them, this will be the Nasi, "My children, do you throw thorns in my eyes, me being the Nasi of Israel?"
He's the Nasi, right?
Rabbi Chia said to him, "My teacher, do not view their behavior in a negative light. Wine is given in letters of 70, and secret is given in letters of 70. Wine enters, secrets emerge."
All right. Thank you. So this is a very bizarre Talmudic drinking story where Rabbi Yehuda Nasi just wants these young men to loosen up. They get drunk and they start saying, "Well, you're going to be destroyed." like what? Like that went from 0 to 60 really quickly. Yeah, that escalated really quickly. Yeah, but then Rabbi Chia, who's their father, defends them, saying, well, actually, it's actually fascinating. He says, don't."
It's making sense with the whole.
He is defending them. He says, "Do not view their behavior in a negative light." Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is very upset at this.
Yeah.
He's like, "Why you are telling me in my own house these things?" And so Rabbi Chia is defending, saying it's not a bad thing. In fact, wine here is something that's providing secrets to come out, right?
Right, but then in that case, like that, if it's a secret, like so if the secret's out, this is what's going to happen, or if this is what they're thinking. Then that doesn't put anything in a better light.
Reinforcing what they're saying as a truth.
Yeah, Rabbi Chia is, yeah.
I don't see that very comfortable. You know what I mean?
Right. It's definitely a tough truth to swallow in his own house. It's tough for Rabbi. It's interesting. Like I'm picturing Rabbi Yehuda Nasi here. Like I just gave these young men some wine to drink, and now they're telling me like this house needs to be destroyed. Like that's not a great line. Really fascinating for Rabbi Chia to come and say, "Nichnasan yatzasod," right? Wine enters, secrets emerge. This is, this may be an uncomfortable truth, but it's important for you to hear.
It's interesting. The first time I heard it, it's like Nichnasan yatzasod, which is a very common phrase. He's saying the gematria of yain is the same as sod, 70 and 70. Nichnas yain yatzasod.
It's a gematria thing.
Right. Which also like
it also appears in Eruvin 60, but that's more of just a quick little statement. This is a fuller expression of that phrase and talking about the gematria.
Is this like a nevuah? Like, where did this come from?
It's something. It's like almost like a quasi nevuah.
Because it's in quotation.
It's a sod.
English, but in Hebrew, they've so patchu v'amru shein ben David ba'ad sheich. Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not.
I don't know. Maybe that's just their own wisdom, insight. But I'm still super fascinated by Rebbe Chia say, first of all, you got them drunk, but second of all, this isn't a bad thing. Nichnasan yatzasod, and gematria works, and it's fine. Rebbe Chia is defending them to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. This drunkenness is fine, and you don't know what secrets will emerge.
Don't blame the messenger. It's like
right. Right.
These guys they're just
Absolutely. Okay. Any thoughts, comments, questions, queries, concerns, curiosities? Before we move on to this final sheets. And of course, more drinking stories.
Also, this last text, no indication.
Right.
Right.
There's no temporal horizon.
It's not as if he needs these two young
Scholars.
Just to quote Yeshayahu to him, like he could have easily also been familiar with this code and be like, yes, I know, someday it might be me, it might be my offspring, my children. And
thank you.
Okay, you know what, maybe that, when that day happens and we're at our lowest of lows, then Mashiach will come. Like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Like, I'm good with that.
By the way, I like the English translation to be a rock of offense. I mean, offense in the sense of like offensive. Like, how they offended.
Not sure, rock of offense to both houses. Okay.
They certainly were offensive to one of the houses. I mean, that only works.
Yes, we're going to see a couple of maybe non-positive, like not everything is positive, not everything is rose-colored. I know, shocking about drunkenness. But there's also all these stories. It's like it happens, and these rabbis, it happens in these public or semi-quasi-public situations.
Not just it happens, but it happened. Here's a story.
It happened. These rabbis don't say this is against Judaism. Like these rabbis are doing it, and that's was normal. We got text 12, and just as we had one rabbinic drinking story, you guessed it, we get another rabbinic drinking story, and this is also early 3rd century. So it seems to be 3 different pairings. When Rav Huna would leave from the house of Rav, that was his teacher. When Rav would leave from the house of Rabbi Chia, his teacher, and Rabbi Chia from the house of Rebbe, his teacher. And also, we saw in the previous story, Rabbi Chia had brought his sons over with Rebbe, and Rebbe got his sons drunk. In this story, we don't see his sons, but he got drunk, right? So apparently, Rebbe's getting people drunk at his house. That's undisputed here. No one disputes that. So it says, when they were drunk, leaving from the house, they would bring oil and salt and rub them on the palms of their hands and the soles of their feet and say, just as this oil is clear, so let the wine of so-and-so, son of so-and-so, become clear. And if they were not drunk, they would bring the sealing clay of a barrel and soak it in water and say, just as this sealing clay is clear, so let the wine of so-and-so, son of so-and-so, become clear. Do I actually understand the mechanics of how this works? No, it's something I was looking into last night. I'm not exactly sure. The one thing I'm pretty confident in describing about this is to say that when they were leaving, when they were leaving drunk, they wanted to bless the whomever the host was. Mm-hmm. Thank you for being such a gracious host. May your wine be clear. And I think that's meant speaking to the quality of the wine, that it should be a higher quality of wine. I guess. I think so. Yeah, I'm leaving happily inebriated. I'm drunk. I was well taken care of by here. I hope that all their wine is so quality. And if they left not drunk, meaning this was on multiple occasions, like this, and they would leave from the Rebbe's houses, whomever, and it sounds like on a multiplicity of occasions. And on the occasions they left and they were not fully drunk, clearly an attempt had been made but not been achieved, they would say, may they have murky wine. And that sounds like a lower quality of wine. But it's also fascinating. They're talking about quality, not quantity, because clearly they aspire to having quantity at their host house so that they can actually leave happily fulfilled being drunk. Now, I don't know that the mechanics of the blessing it's not even a full curse. It's just like, okay, I still want them to have wine, right? But they're really... Yeah. I will say one little thing, which is just the literary context. This text is immediately following another text in the Sugya where it talks about, it says it's mutter, it's permissible to rub oil and salt together on Shabbat. So it's not really clear that these instances of them going over is necessarily on Shabbat, although clearly the literary arrangement of the Sugya would make us think that. But, this can be, it doesn't have to be on Shabbat. But they were definitely going there, getting drunk sometimes, not getting drunk other times. And it was a common experience, and drunkenness is something perhaps, I don't know, maybe achievement is too high of a word, but a good thing to receive from a host. Hey there, I wanted to break in yet again. Although I asked for support in financial ways because it does cost some money to make the hosting happen and other aspects of Jewish drinking happen. So your financial support is definitely appreciated. And don't forget, you can go to jewishdrinking.com/donate. But also, another way of supporting the show and everything that Jewish Drinking does is also to tell your friends, tell your neighbors. If you like this content, if you like this show, maybe people also like it. So feel free to let them know, hey, I have this interesting episode I heard, or a few episodes, or whatever it is, or even a few clips. Feel free to share with your friends. All right, thank you so much. Now back into the show. And now we're going to look at a couple of other of texts, which are, I think, the ones that really provide the least kind light to drunkenness amongst the texts we will be considering for our session today.
Yehuda said, Rab said, 42-letter name may be transmitted only to one who is discreet and humble and stands at half his life, does not get angry and does not get drunk, and does not insist upon his rights. And anyone who knows and is careful with it and guards his impurity is beloved above and treasured below. And fear of him is cast upon the creatures, and he inherits two worlds, this world and the world to come.
Again, early to mid 3rd century text, significant rabbis, and they're saying this special 42-letter name of God, it's
We're familiar with or not?
it's something special. Obviously, it was very protected and guarded. And but but one of the most important parts here is this is almost praising someone who it's a high achievement. I mean, you look at the other things. Okay, so they don't insist upon the rights, and but also guards and impurity. All these very nice things. But clearly, you have to be able to not ever get drunk in order to be in the special prized position to receive this. And speaking of someone who never gets drunk, that also brings us to text 14.
Behold, is one blessed to eat, loves to be people, one who does not get angry, one who does not get drunk, and one who is forgiven.
So this is really praising people who never get drunk. They never get drunk. What a lovely person. God loves them. God loves them. That's wonderful. That definitely speaks high. They don't ever get drunk. That is good for them. This is clearly a Talmudic text that praises from a God perspective that God loves these people. They never get angry. They never get drunk. And one who's forgiving. They can be totally different people. Really, this probably is the highest praise for someone who never gets drunk in the Talmud. Sort of an anti-drunkenness text, but it's not. Now, the really fascinating thing that I did not include, which I was this close to including, was the next line in the Talmud. Right after this says there are 3 God hates, right? So you have the inverse. But what's not there? One who gets drunk, right? It doesn't say God hates that person.
Why'd you put that in?
I should have, which is like you would have expected maybe the inverse of it, but it's not there. God doesn't hate people who get drunk. It's just he just like they're special. So in these 2 texts, we've seen one who never gets drunk is not only especially beloved by God, but also can achieve this very special ability for receiving the 42-letter name. Here is another drunken rabbi story. Another Talmudic drunken history, right? Okay, text 15. Talmudic drunken history returns, and we have a pair of sages who got... By the way, I'm just going to put a pause. This is coming up in the text, in the context, literary context, of the very first Mishnah in Brachot that talks about Rabban Gamliel's sons returning home late at night. They had been late at a mishteh. They had been at a drinking party, and they stumbled in past midnight. It doesn't say they stumbled, but they're at a drinking party and they're coming home after midnight. How are you not stumbling? And they come home, just to remind us. It's funny. This is it's not clear that they were drunk. Easily clear they were drinking. And what happens in that first Mishnah in Brachot? The story is they say, "Oh, hi," like I don't know. The image on picture is like, "Oh, hi, Dad. How's it going?" We haven't said Shema tonight. Like that's the first thing. Like your dad's upset at you. He's like in the kitchen and like he came home late, but you're worried about Shema. Okay, well I am Rabban Gamliel, so you're talking my language. And so one of the things that is in the first Mishnah is that you're supposed to say Shema at night before Chatzot Halayla, before the middle of the night. But so they say, "Oh, sorry, we missed it. He's like, "No, this whole middle of the night business was just a safeguard, so you don't forget. Really, you can say it the entire night, right?" So that's that drinking story that's really in the first Mishnah. Like, there's drinking already there. So this is in the context of how late can you say Shema, because you drink at night. You can drink during the day, but nighttime is usually when drinking happens. Now, they were at a wedding. So they were drinking at a wedding, and apparently this wedding the drinking at the wedding went really late, and so they were at the wedding of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi's son. They came before Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, And the context of this, when he says Rabbi Shimon is worthy to rely upon in exigent circumstances, the context is there's like two versions of this statement. You can say Shema either twice at night or twice during the day. And there's different versions, but whether it's right before and right after Alos Amud Hashachar or right before and right after Hanei Tzachama. So either the very first light emerging or actual sunrise. But I'm not going to go into which is which. But the ability to say Shema for the nighttime at the end of the night, right? So we're talking, I don't know, 4 or 5. I don't know about 6 a.m., but we're talking in that area. We're not talking about 1 or 2 a.m. We're talking about probably closer to 5 a.m. here. And then maybe just waiting a half hour and then saying Shema for the morning and then just sleeping it off, right? Right. So that's really what their concern is. So he says, look, in these b'shas ledchak, because you're not always going to be out drinking late at a wedding, right? This is a special occasion. The amusing thing to me is Rashi's comment here is, well, so they were at the party and they fell asleep and then they woke up. They hadn't said Shema yet, and they woke up at 5 a.m. I think that's lovely. I really think they were just drinking the whole... what's more likely? You're at a party, I don't know, unless you fell asleep on a sofa or something, but they literally just could have been drinking the night away. And they're just like, oh, we haven't said nighttime Shema. We were so busy with the reception and this and that. So Rav Hamnuna said, how many significant halachot can be derived from these verses of Chana? I'm not going to read all of them. But the final one is this final one, Eli Shikora. Eli thought she was drunk. And he says, Mikan Shikor Asur Li Palel. Here, a drunk person is forbidden to pray. We learn this out from Chana. So that is interesting. Just because we read earlier that someone who is drunk is exempt, is patur, but that means you can still do it. Here, however, he is coming to say, just because we have that earlier precedental text that you exempt, I am actually going to come and say, we learn from Chana that you're forbidden. This is asur. This is off limits. This is not even something it's not just patur, now you're even asur to pray. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a spoiler. This is something we're going to see develop in the second half of our exploration of the Bavli. Now we're going to finish off with a rather wild Talmudic drinking story.
Yet another sage, 3rd century, began his remarks and said, there was an incident there involving a man who set his eyes upon his wife to divorce her. Her marriage contract was large, and he wished to avoid having to pay. What did he do? He went and invited his friends, gave them food and drink, and made them drunk, and laid his friend and his wife upon bed. He then brought the white of an egg, which has the appearance of semen, and placed it on the sheet between them. He then stood witnesses over them so that they could offer testimony on what they did.
Yeah. You got a bunch of people drunk. Yeah. He went all that way to get out of paying ketubah.
Yeah.
But you know what? Getting like a whole keg of wine is still cheaper than the ketubah.
I'm just imagining this whole story. The edim, the witnesses that he got to come in, it's like, come, look, see what happened. They walk in, they see all the friends, they see the rabbi's wife, are like, I'm not touching them.
Well, no one said anything about rabbis. Wait. No one said anything about rabbis. Actually, all the other drinking stories we've seen are all rabbis. This is a very distinctly non-rabbinic story. This is a rabbi talking about this incident, but none of these people and none of the neighbors or whomever are actually rabbis. Right. But it's a similar...
When are you going around telling stories like this?
Yeah. But it's an interesting way of getting out of it. But you know what? Things can happen. And actually, the really interesting thing about getting drunk is that, we talk about there's can be some sexual stuff happening. This is the funny thing. This is like sexual stuff could have happened. Clearly, these two people did not do anything, but just because they were drunk and the other people around were drunk, they're like, it could have happened. And so it's just really, I don't know. It's a very amusing story because all the other drinking stories were rabbis. This is definitely trying to get out of the ketubah. So for the Tannaitic stuff, so as sort of a conclusion for our session today, but not all of the Babylonian Talmud, but for the first 6 texts we saw, the Tannaitic stuff, that really the early rabbinic stuff, as evidence is witnessed in the Babylonian Talmud, is you have some drunkenness. Obviously, we saw in the text about one who's drunk is responsible for everything they do. All their transactions count. They are exempt from prayer, but they're still responsible. That really, I think, was the most significant text. We saw that other thing about the Kohanim, that it's puzzle, that their actions, they just do not count. And then when we saw these 3rd century texts here, we saw a multiplicity of rabbinic drinking stories. Rabbis are getting drunk with other rabbis, with their rabbis, the ones they're learning from. That's a normal course of action. We saw also these young students at this the wedding getting drunk and staying the whole night out. We also saw a story about Rebbe Chia's sons when they're at Rebbe's house, and Rebbe Chia defending them and talking about Nichnas Yain Yatsa Sod, that once wine enters, then secrets emerge, and he defends them. That's fine. So, and even for Rebbe, right? We see Rebbe happening, and people come away from Rebbe Chia coming out of his house drunk, and that's sort of a normal course of the way that they behave. We also saw, of course, Rebbe Chia talking about the one we talked about with the exempt from prayer if you're drunk, but once you reach the shikurto shalot, the drunkenness alone, then do you really know what's going on? Do you have any sense maybe that's actually an out, that maybe there is just a level at which you really have no idea what's flying. We also saw about the mourner's house. Not really clear what the mechanism of the drunkenness is, whether the rabbis were not okay with mandating drunkenness, or they just didn't want drunkenness to occur at all. That's a perspective issue. Anything else? I think those are the more salient, more significant texts. Of course, we also had that second to last text as well that talks about being forbidden to pray when drunk, which a little bit setting up a foreshadowing for our second session on the Babylonian Talmud, which they develop further as far, because this is, it comes up. People get drunk, but we also have to pray. So what's the interplay between those two items? We're also going to see the Purim texts next time. That's true. In context. Well, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. And with that, I want to wish everybody a l'chaim. L'chaim!